So here in studio with me, I have Steve Biko, aka Soko Analyst. He is a research analyst just to help us understand what this means for our biashara, how to make sure that you stay afloat and the solutions around this. Biko, it's good to have you. I hope it's not too late to wish you a new year. I mean, we're still within our first week. Yeah. It might be.
Do with all the good luck.
We need it.
Yes.
We do need it.
Yes,
look at that,
true.
the presumptive tax. Are you surprised that it's finally being ruled out, it's coming into effect this January?
Well, to just try and put things in perspective, we need to understand that the government is actually on a very serious budget deficit. So the Uhuru administration is actually trying to see how best they can be able to raise capital to be able to sort out. I think one of the key challenges we're going to have this year is basically paying off our debts. And I think that's a very big headache. And what we've been able to see, because we're just looking at the numbers for the last 10 years, when you look at the normal, how KRA has been collecting taxes from the traditional turnover tax, which was the set base for taxing the informal sectors and the SMEs and things like that. And you realize that the money that was coming out of this was actually very little. One, because at the end of the day, for example, a business that's making 5 million, when you look at how that 5 million has been computed to arrive at the 5 million, you're paying rent, you're paying salaries, you're paying licenses, you're paying suppliers. I mean, most of the SME owners have been surviving on hand to mouth. So at the end of the year, when they're filing the tax returns, basically they'll file nil. Now, of course, they'll be able to compute and show the paperwork, which will actually end up being nil. So you realize that KRA didn't have an option in being able to tax this case, because when you look at the paperwork, everything is actually very nil, because there's no money to be able to be taxed. So what they've done is to be able to tax you before you do your business, basically, which is actually going to have a very negative ripple impact on the informal sector, because now what's going to happen is, for example, someone like me who has an office with, say, 10 computers, because the Nairobi County government will compute your license fee based on how many computers, for example, you have in the office. So if I'm doing social media work, or if I'm doing IT, cyber cafe, for example, and I have 50 computers, I'll end up paying probably 50,000 in terms of taxation. And now when looking at the presumptive tax about this, it's coming to around 7,500, which at the end of the day could be the only profit this business will make in that whole year. So what's going to happen is people who don't really need offices are going to shut down. And we're looking at 2.7 million SMEs. Half of them are going to shut down at the end of the day, because ultimately, why am I paying 10,000 before I'm able to do the business? Before I'm able to even look for the client, before I'm able to even to get an employee to come and run the business. So the impact of this is most of the businesses are going to shut down. People are going to relocate to work from home. You're going to see a surge in uptake for home internet solutions, because now people are going to prefer to work from home, sort things from home. You're going to see, well, restaurants will boom, because at the end of the day, people will need places to be able to do their meetings. But at the end of the day, KRA will not be able to meet its impact, because what they're going to do is now be able to shut down the ability for businesses to be able to grow. Because, for example, one of the things that creates confidence and credibility for business is an office. But now with this presumptive tax, what's going to happen is basically people are going to shut down. And I should have started by saying that at the end of the day, an ordinary SME person pays up to 16 different types of taxes. And this is an unnecessary kind of tax, because it's going to make it very difficult. Let's look at colleges, for example. They're paying up to 90,000 in terms of license fees. So what's going to happen is, if I go to, for example, now I operate in 2 counties, Bungoma and Nairobi. So if I go to Bungoma, they'll not be able to give me my license, because I will need to pay the tax first. And probably I'm just setting up a business, try and expand from Nairobi to see how I can be able to take advantage of devolution. And I won't be able to do this, so I'll end up shutting down the office. So it's going to have a very grave, risky ripple effect on businesses trying to take advantage of the devolution at the end of the day, because taxing someone before they're able to make the money is actually very wrong. And the other thing now, when you look at the other forms of taxes, for example, the matatu sector, there's a tax actually paying, I'm trying to remember the name is on top of my tongue, and where they're paying 60 shillings per passenger per month. So when you look at the kind of taxes that an ordinary SME person is going to pay, this is going to actually be very difficult. I know Kenyans are resilient, but when you put everything in perspective, the SME world is not going to be actually very conducive. But to put it on a bigger perspective, let's look at the informal sector. Banks lost 63 billion in bad loans last year, and they made profits of 57 billion. So when you look at the numbers, you can be able to tell that the manufacturing sector and the trading production aspect was actually slow. Delayed payments from government and government agencies was actually to play to this. So when you look at that, then you look at what the KRA and National Treasury are doing in terms of taxation, then you realize that 2019 is actually going to be very grim for SMEs. But it's a good thing, because now it will make the informal sector actually become more resilient and actually try to uptake a couple of things that we've been pushing for the years, in terms of record keeping, in terms of actually hiring professionals, in terms of accountants, tax experts, to be able to help you understand the kind of taxes you're paying. For example, someone who will be doing import or export business, it's actually going to be very expensive for them, because now almost 90% of what you'll be making will be going to taxes. So it's going to be an interesting year. The opportunities are there. But I'm hoping Uhuru can be able to see the challenges and the pain he's been able to pin on the SME sector. And I'm glad he admitted that a while back in Strathmore. But I think admitting one thing is one, but actually going ahead and actioning on it and trying to improve the working environment is another.
Now, help us understand this. You've already talked about the aspect of there being other taxes that are already involved. E.g., let's take a cafe, for example. The food that you probably eat, you already taxed it, right? And there's a lot of, and it's right there on your screens, where you find that if you own a Chips Cafe, your annual permit is about 20,000 Kenyan shillings, and your new tax is 3,000 Kenyan shillings. But then the other conversation, the other question would be the fact that there are other taxes already involved. By the time you are ordering your cup of coffee or taking a soda, that in itself has already been taxed.
As an SME owner running a restaurant is actually very challenging, because one, we'll start with the health department from the national level, the health department from the county level. Just approvals for that alone. Fire safety, that's another aspect of license. Ensuring that your nutritional aspect, the foods you're getting in, actually inspect and meet the standard. So that's the third aspect. Then we bring in the tourism levy, which is actually both handled by both the customer and the owner. Then, of course, put in the normal license now for the business. Put in your... Now, a restaurant probably will do more than 5 million. So you're going to do the presumptive tax on that, which is before the year begins, to be able to get the license. Then you'll be able to do the turnover tax at the end of the day if you're doing more than 5 million. So when you look at the taxes involved in this aspect, it's actually very crazy. And not to mention that this being a health aspect, there are other issues involved in whereby the health department will have its own fees, where they're charging when coming to inspect your food, coming to inspect your equipment. We have got the fire. For example, Nairobi County will look at the aspect of how fire safety issues, escape aspects, toiletries, bathrooms, and things like that. So it's actually very difficult to run a business. And that's why it becomes painful, to say the least, when a government doesn't really care on the conducive environment to be able to run a business. We've seen Nairobi actually blooming in terms of restaurants. And we've been talking about where money is coming from to be able to push these restaurants up ahead. But when you look at the survival rate for most of these restaurants, it's actually a maximum of 2 years. After 2 years, the owners run into a lot of debts, a lot of loans, and end up shutting down and selling to someone else who has capital, thinking that it's actually an interesting business to do.
Right. And before we even come to discuss solutions, these 2.7 million Kenyans who are said to be affected, the county government came out and said, listen, Kerry, we're not even going to help you collect the tax to begin with. So you have KRA, a government institution, and you have the county saying, we won't help you when it comes to collecting this tax. The fact that we do not have perhaps a proper system in place to govern this new, well, it's not necessarily new because it was introduced last year. We're just seeing it into effect right now. Does it not speak volume about how confused our own government is when it comes to this?
One, we've seen how the implementation of the Finance Bill 2018 has been. A lot of players have gone to court to actually get injunctions against some of the provisions in the Act. And it's sad to say that there's no coordination, and there's no partnership. There's no cohesiveness to try and create a working environment for the SMEs by both the national government and the county government. Because what will happen is Parliament has passed this into a law. So what happens is, if I go to Nairobi County and I get my license without paying for this tax, what will happen is, when KRA comes to audit me, I'll be charged, one, for corruption, and if I didn't pay taxes. That's one aspect. And then two, probably the issue of corruption, and maybe I colluded with someone at the county aspects. So first, lack of cooperation between the two government units is actually a big prohibitive aspect in terms of creating the needed positive working environment for SMEs. Two, the fact that now KRA will have an opportunity to actually take you to court and sue you for evading taxes. And now this will open up more challenges, because now what will happen is KRA will come and demand an audit of all your processes.
Because here's the thing.